Hello, this is Ross Payton with Ludonarrative Dissidents. It's time for Season 3 of the podcast. Our Kickstarter is live. It's running from March 4th to April 7th. The link is in the show notes. This time we're expanding into adventures and supplements. For this episode, we're reviewing the Dungeon Crawl Classics adventure Hole in the Sky, which was run as our Season 2 finale actual play. Look at the Kickstarter page for the rewards, including a PDF zine written by us, and a list of books you can vote on for us to review. Thanks so much for your support. Don't forget to back it and enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to episode 0 of Ludonarrative Dissidents, Season 3. In this first episode, we're going to be looking at Hole in the Sky, a Dungeon Crawl Classics adventure written by Brendan J. LaSalle. It is DCC module number 86, published by Goodman Games. Copyright date is 2015. And if you are a longtime listener of our podcast, or even a somewhat recent listener, this was the module that we ran as the season finale for season 2. So you can go back, you can first listen to that and hear how this adventure plays, or at least one version of it plays. And but now we can go behind the scenes and see what all the secrets of this module are, and discuss its merits and flaws. And of course, as always, I have my good friends and co-host, Greg Stolze. Say hello, Greg.
By the frosty beard of Ymir the giant, 'tis cold here in Wisconsin. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, well, you just get into the role-playing of an epic fantasy game. That's what it is. We are recording this in January 2024. And of course, my other co-host and friend, James Wallace. Say hello.
Hello, I'm in London and it's frosty.
And it is cold here as well, although the snow has started to melt here in Missouri. So for adventures, like what we do for role-playing games, as systems, we answer a series of questions about this. So for adventures, it should go a little different. So our first question for at least this episode 0 will be, what does this adventure promise to do? This adventure in particular is very good at being upfront about what it is about, because in the introduction on page 2 of the adventure, Hole in the Sky is designed for 16 to 24 level 0 DCC RPG characters who should funnel down to a small group of PCs that rise to level 1 and go on to fabulous adventures. This adventure is cosmic in scope, but the adventurers will have to muck through the trenches to accomplish their objective. Only the tenacious, resourceful, and lucky can survive.
Wait,
so this is
PCs
essentially...
do what to first level?
They will rise to first level. And
the
go
adventurers what muck through the trenches?
They muck through the trenches to accomplish their objective.
No. The adventurers what?
Have to muck through the trenches.
Have to?
Oh no. Yes.
And there were 49 of them in 16 pages.
Early in season 3.
I'm starting strong with what I believe in, James.
It's true.
Curse you, Stolze.
Yes, the future conditional tense.
Yes, for listeners unfamiliar with this, who are diving in at the start of season 3 as their introduction to it, Greg has a thing about the use of the future conditional tense. To wit, you shouldn't use it in roleplay stuff. Say the players do something, not will do something. It adds vim and immediacy to your writing.
Thank you, James. Mm-hmm. And anytime I read the future conditional, I am cursed, and one of my hairs turns white forever. So that's how it happened, if you were wondering. When I married in 1994, my hair was sable black, and now I look like a dandelion clock.
Or a wizard.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's not all bad.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
Yeah, exactly.
If you got a head full of white hair, everyone assumes you are like 10% smarter than you actually are, which is... I like that part. I also noticed something about the introduction. I read the whole thing, but see, you read the second paragraph, which is very accurate. Mm-hmm. But the first paragraph is, remember the good old days when adventures were underground, NPCs were there to be killed, and the finale of every dungeon was the dragon on the 20th level? Those days are back. And I'm like, this is the most insecure opening paragraph I've read in a long time. Dude, if this is the 86th level, wait, so 86th adventure for Dungeon Crawl Classics. I had not noticed the little number 86 on that. So there are 85 before this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some of those are written for other systems.
Oh, okay.
Like I mean, D&D, yeah.
But
they've been, yeah.
Because it's like, by the time you've written like 10 adventures for it, you would think people would be like, okay, I get it. This is this OSR thing I've been reading about so much. And it's like, don't tell me, don't start off as a hater. Come on.
Yeah, I spotted that as well, but my reaction to it was, hold on, this is an adventure in which no part of it takes place underground. There is nothing even faintly resembling a dragon. And the whole idea of level 0 peasant funnels exists nowhere in original D&D or
That's
Advanced
true.
Dungeons and Dragons or anything else. This is, as far as I know, a Dungeon Crawl Classics innovation.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a traditional role-playing game adventure by the standards you have just set yourself. Why is this paragraph even here? It is not a good start.
To my knowledge, that paragraph is literally in every single DCC module. It is a marketing branding thing.
It's boilerplate.
Yeah, it's boilerplate. Whatever you say about Goodman Games, they are very good at marketing. They know their audience. They know how to reach them, and they repetition. For me, I associate with the 1970s van art style of fantasy, and they're very good at that.
Which is fine, but man, you don't have to roll up here like a Midwestern classic rock star. This isn't your dad's. This isn't your daddy's rock and roll. And now, Led Zeppelin. It's like, come on, man.
No, you're forgetting it's going to be Radioactive by Imagine Dragons.
It is very, a lot of the art is very 70s.
Yes.
And at the same time, it's quite representational as well. There's a number of black women in there, but they're all wearing 70s fashion. They've got big 70s afros and flares. Mm-hmm. It's kind of odd.
Mm-hmm.
Where else have we got these beflared women
at the very end? Again, that's part of the marketing, sort of like
penultimate page. She's not. Yeah, she is wearing flares. I don't think she's wearing trousers, but she's wearing flares.
Yeah, those are kind of like their iconic characters. Those characters show up frequently in DC module artwork and marketing imagery. So I am familiar with Goodman Games. I run their games several times. Actually, written a little bit for them years and years ago. But yeah, this is the funnel adventure, as you mentioned, James, is innovation of DCC. And just so you know, this is a very formalized structure for this adventure. The idea is every player gets 4 characters, all level 0 peasants, and any character that survives the adventure gets to get a character class. So in a way, this adventure is a very much like an origin story for your adventuring party. And just to explain, this is not like a typical dungeon crawl. It's there's a very particular style to it.
It's a typical dungeon crawl in as much as it's infested with the future conditional. It really is like the old days, but okay. And
it's very railroady as a dungeon crawl, but this is also these peasant funnel adventures. For me, this is very much designed to be a convention game, and by that I mean it is meant to be. A volunteer can pick up, read this, and run it for a group of, 4 to 6 strangers at a convention, Gen Con, Origins, whatever, or your local gaming con, and run it in a 4-hour slot, because that's usually how much one-shot RPGs get in a convention slot. And so the idea is you sit down at a table not knowing anything about this game. You learn how to play, you get your peasants, and you run through an adventure, and you have a memorable experience, and then you're done, and then you know whether or not you want to keep playing this game. And so it's a very practical, a funnel to get players into Dungeon Crawl Classics. So that's what it promises to do, is to sort of have this introductory experience to the system, the setting, and the aesthetic of Dungeon Crawl Classics. But yeah, it is a pretty interesting story behind it, because I think the thing I like about this is it takes... Like D&D, you would have, go out and go fight some kobolds in a hole in a cave behind a waterfall or something. And this one is like, no. We can raise the stakes, because mechanically it doesn't matter if the monster you're fighting is a kobold or a cosmic 1,000-year-old god, if they, deity or creation of a deity, if they have the same stats. we could just say whatever we want it to be.
Whoa, how many hit points does a kobold have? 4. How many hit points does the exudation of the ancient cosmic evil have? 4.
Yeah, why not?
And I think because you're level 0, how many hit points do you have? Oh, less than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this house cat's gonna kick my ass, boys.
Well, some of the characters we generated for this were useless. I mean, they were generally appalling specimens of humanity or elfinity or dwarfinity. They were just, why have these people come on an adventure? Oh, well, because they've had strange dreams from the Lady in Blue, except it's not the Lady in Blue we discover when we've read the DM's notes.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll come on to that.
I will tell you, speaking of the illustrations, I looked at page 5 and I'm like, yeah, this is an energetic illustration. I like it. But man, these people who are getting their asses handed to them by the Sea Shrikes are clearly much, 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 much better prepared and equipped than we were.
That's true. There's a wizard. There's a guy with a shield and a sword. Yeah. No.
And
Two
a
people with
helmet?
Yeah.
2 people with helmets, an actual crossbow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Why didn't she just send in the Navy SEALs? Holy shit. I mean,
But this is part of the background. They did. They tried to.
Oh, these are the but all right. I looked at, I'm reading this and reached the part where, well, the Sea Shrikes have feasted on adventurers traveling the bridge for generations. And I'm like, wait, but isn't the bridge only conditionally present when someone's walking on it? They established that when it's like, oh no, you can't go backwards. The bridge stops existing, 10 feet after you walk on it. I'm like, and how generations, how long has that shipwreck? And it just, I mean, it's not player facing information, so I guess it doesn't matter, but it just sort of feels pulled out of the ass. And that's fine in the heat of running stuff at the table. But man, when you're going to put it on the page and have it be like copy edited and dissected on podcasts and played by many people, it's like, man, maybe give that another pass.
There's a bunch of bits like that. Before we start getting into the minutiae of what doesn't work, let's give a quick run through of what the structure of the adventure for people who don't have 3 hours to listen to our actual play. A colossal number of 0-level characters are recruited in their dreams by the Lady in Blue, summoned to a banqueting table in the middle of nowhere, filled with food, some of which is rotten. They are basically recruited. If they decline to go on the adventure, are they killed, or do they? I can't remember exactly.
I think they are killed. Their heads
killed
show
off
up
stage under shady circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the Lady in Blue has several heads. Some of them on her necks, some of them tied to her belt. She's clearly not a nice person. It turns out she's a massive avatar of chaos, but we'll come on to that. Anyway, if you accept the challenge, you get a little time to prepare at the local village, and then you step onto an invisible bridge at, is it midnight or moonrise?
I think, it's midnight. Yeah.
Anyway, and this invisible bridge just stretches out over the sea, quite high up above the sea to a degree that if you fall off the bridge, you will die. But it's not a bridge. It's a segment that kind of moves with you, and you will be on this thing walking forward for 3 days. And then finally you get to the hole in the sky, which is a hole in the sky. You go through it. There's a massive kind of organic fortress thing within which is the person you're supposed to be rescuing and a titan who is asleep and various bees and people who have clearly been here before a while and have gone mad and are cursing the name of the Lady in Blue.
And the Cur Maxima.
The Cur Maxima, a giant flying pumpkin, which talks to you in a remarkably eloquent way for a giant flying pumpkin, and will only kill one of you at a time. I think mostly out of politeness.
I would say flaming more than flying.
Doesn't it fly?
It climbs the walls. Yeah,
it climbs. Wow.
Focus up, James. Come on. You were picturing it flying the whole time. Why do you even play these games?
One of the things that, and we've talked about this off microphone, is we all think we're inhabiting the same place in our mind's eye when we play a game. We're imagining the same thing. Actually, the moment you start comparing details, it can be very, very different indeed.
Suddenly,
not just where everyone is for a combat.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I thought this thing flew. Evidently it doesn't. Anyway, you find a crack in the wall, you go up inside the crack in the wall. There are survivors there, cannibals, they will try and kill you. And then there are some mutants, and finally you can get out to where the top of the cage, where the thing is, the demon creature is
like a harpy-like demon, yeah.
Yeah. You free her, which is surprisingly easy. She kills the Titan, who is still asleep at the time, I think, and takes you back, and you get weird rewards from the Wheel of Destiny, and can become real player characters. And that's kind of the high points.
I didn't think that freeing her was that easy. There was a realistic chance to fall, and if you just, fail a pretty simple saving throw, it's like, oh, you fall straight into the Titan's mouth, and he doesn't quite wake up, but he wakes up enough to swallow you. Bye.
Yeah, he yawns coincidentally. Yeah.
It's 2 strength checks and a fortitude check, but there are, each of you has got 4 player characters. So
each of you has 4 player characters, minus those killed by the sea shrikes, minus those killed by the cannibals, minus those cur maximized.
Yeah. Okay, good point.
That is true. And that again, that's the whole point of this adventure, is to see how many of your peasants make it through.
Book of matches, but you burn through a lot of matches.
You really do. I actually ran this the second time for the RPPR patrons. And they had a similar pretty bloody ending. I think they had 50% casualties when it was all said and done. You're not supposed to get 100%, although it's certainly possible. Because again, this is meant to be the origin story of your adventuring party. And this is also, I think DCC sort of encourages players to have this sort of troop style where everyone controls multiple characters, and you switch out which one that you're in control of per given session. Kind of that old school D&D feel.
As an aside, did either of you read the recent Oglaf character comic strip with Adventure Block?
I did.
I don't remember that one.
So you see this wizard standing in front of the dungeon, and this block over the stone over the doorway says, "Beware, if you enter the dungeon, something terrible will occur." And the wizard's like, well, that's not very specific. Terrible things happen all the time. Will it happen to me? Will it happen to someone else? I don't know. Well, you want to come with me and find out? Yeah! And the block jumps down, and then you see it with like a nunchucks. It's just this little anthropomorphized stone brick with arms and legs, and it's fighting the kobolds, jumping and driving a sword into this this big demon's head. And then you see it at the bar drinking. It's, and from that day forward, I have been Adventure Block. Wow, what happened to the other guy? He fell in a pit trap. It was terrible. It's really a beautiful piece of comedy.
Yeah. And that's kind of the certainly the vibe of this scenario is well, let's see what happens, let's just go into this crazy dungeon and see who makes it out, because
many people dying in ridiculous ways.
I think the ridiculous ways is key to the scenario's enjoyment, because everything is DCC modules have a very particular setting, which is the opposite of sort of the minimalist, low fantasy Dungeons and Dragons. Kobolds or goblins in a cave and very dreary and sort of bland, which is, no, let's make everything as high fantasy as possible with very unique creatures and locales and NPCs.
Let's make everything as high fantasy as possible without it helping or giving joy to the characters in any way.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a bridge in the sky that's invisible and only conditionally present, but you still have to walk every damn step of these presumably miles and miles, with no shelter from the elements for 3 days, and then camp out another 2 days shivering cold in the upper atmosphere. I'm like, man, you guys couldn't have put a roof on this thing?
Yeah. And if you didn't bring any food, tough.
You couldn't have made it an escalator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
I quite enjoyed that element of it. This is not friendly fantasy. This is a universe that is very much out to kill you and does not explain things. It does explain stuff to the GM, but it doesn't necessarily explain it to the players, which I thought was kind of interesting because we played through it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. We feed the chaos demon, whatever she is, Dresda, and we got our spin on the Wheel of Justice, Wheel of Destiny. And then I read the adventure and discovered that there's a whole level of background to what's going on here. And they've been trying to get her out, they being other Chaos Lords and stuff, for hundreds of years. And you are very much not the first party. You may, in fact, be the They've got so desperate, they are now sending level 0 parties along. It used to be the high-level dudes, the people who actually knew what they were doing. They failed completely. But the Lady in Blue is not actually the Lady in Blue. It's Raxahra, disguised as the Lady in Blue. And I was going,
what was that name again, Jay?
Raxahra. And that's Raxarrah. How would you pronounce that?
Raxahra.
Carefully.
Oh, obviously. Sorry. It's stupid of me. But anyway,
it's not your fault. You're British.
I know. You give me the opportunity to say hurrah, I will. So I was reading through this stuff, going, there's a richness to this. There's clearly a big continuity here, and this must tie into the cosmology of the DCC universe and stuff. I want to find out more. Google all these characters. None of them exist anywhere outside this adventure. And I was just, who is this information for? This is for the GM, but they can't do anything with this. I think there's one opportunity.
Oh, I disagree.
Wait, let me just finish.
I disagree heartily,
Within the adventure, there is one opportunity for the players to find this, where Dresda, if she, rather than flying around and killing a bunch of people and just getting back and wreaking havoc on the world, which she doesn't do, if she decides to sit down and explain her backstory to the PCs, she will. You are given the opportunity of telling your players the backstory to the whole thing. But there's like a page and a half of it. There's a lot of stuff here going on. Sorry, not a page and a half. A good half page of quite intricate background and history to what's going on here. And it doesn't matter that the players don't know it. We didn't know it when we did the actual play. It was still a really fun adventure. But there's no question that I just thought, what is this stuff actually doing here? Because there is, other than this one opportunity, there is no opportunity for the players to find it out. They can't go and quiz. They can't read up on it. They can't go and look up stuff in the archives of their ancestral halls or whatever it might be. This is just there for the GM. But Greg, you thought I was wrong.
I disagreed.
Not the first time.
Well, because I disagreed until you said that key limiting phrase within the text of the adventure. And within the text of the adventure, you're just, a rope maker from Pomona who has dreams of a different life. But it gives you all this stuff so that the GM can riff off it. These are arrows in the GM's quiver because it says, once you've completed Hole in the Sky, now you've been dragged into this world of intrigue and you've become first level characters who are kind of the jabroni do-boys of Dresda and Raxahra. And and you can you're presumably gonna get a chance to throw them over for the Order of the Wise Servants of Yid Girl. Oh my God! Is that what it actually? Oh man,
that's actually what it's called, man. You want me to pronounce that one? I'm not going to pronounce that one.
Please find another pronunciation. It slipped out, and I'm like, wait, did I? Oh no.
Yeah. I mean,
But
that's
anyway,
yeah.
to get back to my point, before the text tricked me into, anyway, is that in a lot of adventures, tell me if you've had this experience as a GM or as an adventure designer, you come up with something where it's like, okay, this is the backstory of the blacksmith's daughter and the shepherd, and they're just going to find this out, and it's like this rural Romeo and Juliet, and they never touch it. And then instead, you mention that the shopkeeper where they're buying rope has this scar through his eyebrow, and they're like, how'd he get that scar? And he's like, oh, I was in the wars. Which war? The Wander Wars. What were the Wander Wars? Well, I don't know, guys, because I just said those 2 words 5 seconds ago. Can you just go talk to the blacksmith's daughter? And if you design enough adventures, you just sort of, you can get this numbness where it's like, why do I bother writing anything cool? They'll never interact with it. Mm-hmm. They will just go off on some wild ass tangent of their own. And I would suspect that what this is it's like, okay, here are pieces that you can shove into your players' wild ass tangents. When they're like, oh man, we really messed up, guys. We released a primal chaos entity. We got to make this right. Well, what do we get? Okay, so now when they go looking for backstory, and you know they're on it, there you have these bits that the writer has said, here you go. You can some assembly required, but you're up to it, right, my man? And you are, because you're the GM. And it is, in some way, it's probably better than having 10 pages of optional stuff that they never interact with. Am I making sense?
The way I see it is that this adventure material, the backstory material that's not used directly in the adventure, is, remember, this is an origin story adventure, right? Like this is how your peasant became an adventurer, a badass. And so it's giving a GM it's giving them like a jigsaw puzzle, but like with only half of the pieces, and the GM's supposed to make up their own. But like all your pieces are not connected, so you have some gaps in there, and so the individual GM can like put in their own pieces. Being a game master is I think it was a Wallace and Gromit cartoon where there's a character on top of a train laying down tracks as the train is going, just laying them out right before the train passes over the tracks. And it feels the GM, you're a lot of the time, especially when you're pulling things out of your ass, you're just laying these train tracks down before the players, hit them. And
just desperately dancing the yes and dance as fast as you can.
And a written adventure is to provide these pre-made train tracks, right? So you don't have to do that all the time. Be like, oh yes, you want to go in this dungeon. Well, here we go. It's all laid out, and I don't have to think about it. Everything's already prepared. I don't have to improvise anything. But like,
just have to spend money instead of exerting thought.
But some of these train tracks are incomplete, and some of them, like, they don't have a start place, but they have an end place, And so, like, the GM be like, well, I can set them up so that they go on this war between law versus chaos, and like now they're a pawn, and I have all these cool story elements I can incorporate into their backstories because they personally met the lady in blue and they personally met Dresda, and they freed her, and blah 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 blah, and
but they didn't meet the lady in blue. They met Raxafra dressed up as the lady in blue.
That's
for
true.
No readily apparent reason. It's all I'm going to say is that if you're doing old school, it didn't feel terribly old school to me. It didn't feel the kind of linear dungeon. I mean, I've talked about this before. One of the reasons that dungeons work, particularly when you're learning to DM, is they are a very enclosed, finite adventure, and the number of things that a player can do within the confines of that narratively is very limited. There are no random NPCs that you can get into discussion. You're not going to, how did you get that scar above your eye? No, because it's kill or be killed. It's try and avoid the trap. When we got the treasure, I feel great. Whoa, let's play some more of this. And you develop your skill. But the old school
dopamine.
Yeah, exactly. And that was very much what I was expected to get. And there's all this other stuff. And as a GM and as a game designer, I love the richness. But I wanted a way to convey that to the players within this adventure rather than as kind of backstory, because the adventure just kind of ends. You get your thing on the Wheel of Destiny, and then it's kind of, and now you can become first level player characters. Boom. And there's no what you can do with this, follow this. There's just the text of the open gaming license, which is, if you want an anti-climax to finish adventure on, that's pretty much it.
Part of that, though, is simply because of the modular nature of these particular scenarios, which are meant to be like interchangeable and like easy to like components, right? Like Legos, you just connect which ones you want to. So they can't be it has to be very self-contained. It has to like definite start, definite end, and just cut it off right at the end, because just to make it more portable, more usable by a variety of GMs.
Yeah, what I was going to bring up is looking at this, and this links into the backstory. In Wild Talents, Ken Hite wrote this great framework for understanding superheroic settings, right? And it had gauges. And one is, one gauge was how morally absolute is it? And it goes from, oh no, we're all just morally self-justifying rats biting each other in a amoral sewer reality, up through Superman is always good, the Joker is always bad. And another one was, well, what's the power level of this? But the one that I think is really relevant to this was the blue gauge, which I guess I would characterize as woohoo-ness. And the example he gave was an Alan Moore quote about Wonder Woman's invisible plane, and it's and how it's so pointless and beautiful, and that it is, and if you are running a high blue game, it's like, man, you can't expect your simplistic moral platitudes to hold up in a world of super intelligent gorillas, man. And that, just how out there is it? And this clearly aims to be out there. And most, the comics, DC and Marvel both have immense amounts of woohoo. The MCU is getting there because, now you've got wizards, and you've got all these different pocket realities, and you've got Wakanda, and you've got, whatever's going on in Echo, and you've got whatever's going on in this other thing, and the Egyptian gods from Moon Knight don't show up anywhere else, even though they should, and the Eternals from the Eternals don't show up anywhere else because they said they wouldn't, and at some point you're like, this is maybe too much, but that's not a problem that Hole in the Sky has succeeded enough to have. I imagine that if we read the other 85 modules before this, then it would start to be like, man, there's too much going on. And the Lady in Blue is just one, it has been reduced to noise. But if your GM cares enough to use this as the jumping off point of, okay, we're going to do, I'm calling this campaign against the Lady in Blue. Unless you guys decide you're gonna be on her side, in which case it's against the wise servants who are maybe secretly racist. And so, it's like, oh, well, basically the author has given you 3 color swatches that you can use to sew an entire outfit for the tailor-made campaign for your players. And, that's better than nothing. And it's probably better than asking people to pay for a bunch of backstory that the characters are never going to interact with. It plays into a little bit, James, the Rashomon thing you were saying earlier, where it's like we all had different experiences. There was no single unitary narrative that got conveyed equally to all of us. Well, take that a step farther, and it's like, well, I'll give you these little connection points in the text, and everyone will agree that it had something to do with this lady carrying severed heads around. But how much more do you actually need to get the experience?
Just to get, so I'm, as being familiar with the DCC module line, I've run other adventures. This is actually pretty, I would say this is about like a 5 on a 10 in terms of weirdness for DCC, because, or maybe 6, because they frequently have time travel or science fiction elements in it.
Oh, no.
One of my favorite adventures is actually called They Serve Brandolin Red, which was reference to a type of wine. And it starts at a wedding. And then giant ants attack the wedding, and, which is a very memorable battle scene when players are improvising weapons from like, oh, well, my character is good at animal handling, so I'm going to get all the doves we were going to release when they said their vows and sick them on the giant ants. Like, all right, fine, great, make a roll for it. Oh, natural 20, yes, of course. So there's
everybody knows the ant has only one enemy in nature, the dove.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just a lot like robots and lasers and just
I'm
crazy
just picturing
stuff.
some bridezilla type. No, this is my special day. Grabs the like candle holders, waving it around at these ants.
No, it's a great module, but like they this is sort of their style of fantasy, which is to make it as weird as possible while still be mechanically a very straightforward game about dungeon crawling, with monsters and traps and puzzles and weird and that kind of thing. So yeah, this is just what they do, and I'm a big fan of it. And in some ways, it's kind of like a Hollywood remake of old school. Like, you know how like, oh, we have this beloved TV show or old movie, and then Hollywood remakes it, gives it a
let's make it glossy.
Extra levels of polish and product. Yeah, like glossy. This is like the D&D you thought you were playing back then, but it's way better than it was. It's way more imaginative and with better art.
James, when you were saying that it was not that it did not remind you of the actual 70s D&D experience, I'm like, to be more 70s D&D, the dreary parts where we were walking on the road for days, that would have involved a bunch of rolls.
Every roll here is to avoid almost certain death. It's nothing if not dramatic, and there's very few of the kind of the cliched encounters that you would expect. There's what I love the first one as you're trekking to the place where all the player characters meet, and it says maybe intercepted by bandits, and they see the mad look in your eye and run away scared. It's, okay, you don't even have to bother with the bandits; they're just gone. And the sea shrikes and
the crazy to profit ratio here. Remember me telling you guys about this? Yeah, it's not right with this one. He gets a pass.
So, but at the same time, some of the situations do feel very old school. It is very linear. The story is very linear. It's basically, if you diverge...
remarkably linear. It literally has a pathway that once you are on it, the only way off is forward or death, and it evaporates behind you.
Yeah.
That, I'm like, is this a subtext? Is this a commentary? Is this a meta-textual?
I definitely took it that way.
I do want to say this is actually the title of the scenario comes from a Black Sabbath song of the same name. So that may have something to do with it. I did listen to the song and read the lyrics. It didn't seem to be particularly about that this particular story, but like at least it was partially evoked by 70s
it's got
metal.
the vibe.
It's got the vibes. The thing is about the road, the invisible road is it didn't take very long for us to play through, and I've run it a second time. It didn't take too long to get through it because it's just you just keep going. But
it's the shrike encounter that takes the time. That was the only thing that really held us up.
It's pointlessly miserable for your characters, and you get sick, and characters can die from getting sick.
Yeah, big combats always take time. Like, I mean, the Tree Shrikes, I actually reduced the number because I thought 7. As written, it's 7 Sea Sharks. And I think I put it down to like 5, simply because I didn't want to deal with D20 combat, even because it's D20 combat is inherently very swingy, right? Like, you're just going to be, everyone's going to be missing a lot of attack rolls when, it's a less than 50% chance to hit somebody usually. Yeah, it's not even really a dungeon crawl per se, because even when you get past that into the actual hole in the sky, it's still extremely linear, and the actual dungeon, the prison part, the fortress, is still like you have to find one hidden path and go up it. That's the only way to it. It doesn't branch out. There aren't like multiple routes that take you to the same end.
I didn't
Yeah.
think that there was anything there I would qualify as a puzzle where you're like, try to figure this out.
I would actually put her Maxima as a puzzle, because you all did not. It took a while for you to realize you can't fight this guy. You just need to run away from him. He's got way more hit points than you have, and he is going to just chew through your entire party, quite literally, if you stay and fight. So I would qualify that as a puzzle. How quickly could you realize you can't fight everything in this adventure? So. Yeah, but other than that, yeah, it's pretty linear. It's incredibly linear.
Yes,
well,
there's only one way to succeed.
Do either of you remember who it was who originally said, nobody minds a railroad game as long as the scenery is pleasant and the last stop is Awesome Town?
I do not.
I don't recognize
I remember reading that probably on RPGNet like 15 years ago, and it stuck with me where I'm
it's
like,
good, yeah.
At the time I'm like, why do people keep playing these lowbrow railroaded games? And I'm like, oh, that's why, because they're fun. Because not everybody wants to put grad school levels of effort into their role-playing game, even though many of us do and get rewarded for it. Other people want something that's just simple, where you see some cool stuff and be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I'm like, okay, I can accept this. I can accept. And the older and more tired I have become, the more I'm like, yes, this is okay. This is good. A game where I don't have to work really hard. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a similar version of it. That my favorite version of a railroad is a roller coaster. A roller coaster is a railroad, but my God, it's fun. If you can give your players a roller coaster, they don't care that there's no branching paths. They're having too much fun.
Roller coasters terrify me. It is one of the few things that, I'm scared of a lot of stuff, but genuine irrational phobias, it's roller coasters.
Oh,
wow.
Which is great. If you got, I recommend it as a phobia, because once you realize, oh yeah, someone would have to press a gun to my temple to get me on that thing. And even then I might fight him for it.
Mm-hmm.
Once you know this about yourself, it's like, I ain't going to Six Flags. Screw that. What am I going to go for? The corn dogs? It's not like having a phobia of dogs or spiders, where you just have to, fortify yourself to get through a day.
Fair enough.
Sorry, that was a little bit of a digression, but that's the kind of quality, incisive digression you can expect from Ludonarrative Dissidents.
Yeah, we'll put a extra reward. Have a stretch goal. Greg will put in 50% more digressions per episode at 200% of our goal. One thing I remember reading an interview with Clive Barker when he was talking about Hellraiser, and he said one of the things I wanted to do with that was I'm tired of horror villains never talking. So I wanted a monster who could talk and explain himself. And I do like that Cur Maxima, even though he's polite and exaggerating, you can't like persuade him, he'll at least talk to you. And I had that, especially my second run through, have that the players actually talk to him a bit. And even though while he was trying to kill them, and they were able to get in it, figure out where he was by hearing him from outside the little hole in the wall of the fortress. So they had an advantage doing that. They also tricked the other prisoners. So I do like the abandoned mutants that are hiding, the survivors that are hiding, that are cannibals, and figure out who to eat next when the player characters show up. As written, you just have to fight your way through, and they're at the top of the ladder and you're at the bottom. You have to fight your way through them. But my player's like, well, let's trick them. Let's try and lure some of them down the ladder, and we'll try and split them up and try and psych them out. And they came up with a plan, and they did it. And I think that's probably the only weakness, is that as written, you kind of, as a GM, you have to kind of like take these elements and sort of like expand on them to make it more than just an exercise in rolling dice. Like it's
something I noticed reading the text is I'm reading along. I'm like, wait a minute. There's nothing in here about the characters being able to help one another when it's time to fall off the bridge during the attack. Ross, you old softy, you let us engage in what do you call it? Not charity, compassion.
Yeah.
It's like you let these people realistically help. Like you actually would. Even if they weren't a character you were controlling, you could still help them.
I mean, yeah, my tendency as a GM is
that at all.
Yeah, no, that's also, that may also be part of the OSR games are rulings, not rules, where the idea is the GM should be able to adjudicate and improvise game mechanics on the fly, which is what I did. And my tendency as a GM is just to say yes and oh yeah, sure, you could do it, and you'll have to make a roll to do it. But yeah, we'll let you try and save somebody falling off the bridge or anything like that. Yeah. But it is there is that line of like, how much do you want to describe unusual situations or mechanics in a scenario? Like, yes, being on a bridge where it's very windy and there could be all kinds of shenanigans and mechanics to sort of play through that, but like, how much do you want of your word count of a scenario to be about that? There's kind of you have to leave in these blind spots, right? So
you cannot predict everything because players are chaos agents second only to the dice, and sometimes not even that.
Yeah.
Sometimes primary.
So, but going back to our questions, James, do you think it fulfills that promise? We've kind of sort of talked about it a little bit. So maybe we're even at like, who is the scenario aimed at?
I think you were bang on to start with. I can imagine playing this at a convention as an introduction to the game and coming away going, "Whoa, okay, Dungeon Crawl Classics, I'm in." Particularly if I'd not role played as much as James Wallace, veteran of the Psychic Wars, has. If this was my first encounter with role playing it, I would be wide eyed. I would be in the playground, the schoolyard, on Monday, going, "Guys, you're not going to believe this. This is so much fun." It is a great adventure in that regard. It's you're up against these cosmic forces, this weird stuff. This, as you say, Van Art fantasy.
Guys, the Titan was so big.
Yeah, and there are flashes of what I, as an experienced game designer, just there's a magic spear that I really like. It's something I didn't mention earlier on. There are a couple of cliches in here that don't, for me, work. There's a tripwire that exists for no particular reason. It's never explained who set it or why the hundreds of people who have passed by it have never set it off beforehand. It's possible. My reading is they set it. The last people to come by this way set it as a kind of alarm. But it's within the context of the adventure. It's just there's a tripwire and you can trip over it and it will probably kill you because that's what everything in this adventure does. And then there's a bit you're going up the ladder. And you find, you spot, it's not one of the rungs of the ladders, it's actually a bone coming out of the wall. And if you unearth it, you find not only the bodies of the very first expedition to come this way, but also their loot, which is pretty good loot. And really, you're the first people to know. Hundreds of people have been this way. It's made this point fairly clear. You're the first people to ever notice that one of the handholds is actually a skeletal human arm. That didn't ring true.
Well, but we never found it.
That's because I skipped that. We were running short on time. I just said, no, you're not going to find it.
I think
y'all don't need that, Y'all don't need that magic spear.
At that point in the scenario, you didn't. Yeah.
But this is the point. The magic spear is really cool. There's armor and holy water and holy symbols in there. But there is this magic spear called Forcer Spear Demon. It's +1 spear. It's not that huge. Against the Titan, it's +3 to hit and automatically slays the beast. That's pretty good. But whoever uses it to deal the Titan the killing blow is drawn into the beast's, I'm reading this, the beast's dream prison. Every night when he sleeps, he visits the terrible dreams of the dead creature, dreams of terrible conquest and terrible obscenities. That, for me, is a magic item. I am sick of +1 and +2 swords and all of that stuff. Magic items should be crafted for a very particular reason or a very particular user, and they should come with side effects. And I love this. I love that sword. It's one paragraph. It's almost a throwaway. Like you say, we missed it completely. But that, for me, as a veteran game designer, was just a, yes, this guy knows what he's doing moment.
And
it's a really, really nice piece of doing.
As an English major, I'm looking at that paragraph and I'm like, this guy used terrible 3 times in 3 lines and dream 3 times in 2 lines. I'm like, man, get a thesaurus. Get a thesaurus or internalize some synonyms for terrible.
Yeah. Or dream.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's flashes of some really nice stuff in here. Not just nice in terms of atmosphere, and as Greg says, not actually great writing. But that's a great item within the context of a game. And being a character who, you may be level 1, but you're already being haunted by the dreams of a dead Titan. That's really cool. I love that.
Yeah.
See, James, you are the rare demographic of gamer who would rather have their character be haunted by the dreams of by the sick and perverse dreams of a dead Titan than have a +2 spear.
A character, a role-playing player character who sleeps well in their bed at night is an uninteresting character as far as I'm concerned.
Well,
yeah.
Considering what I have written and played, I have no stone to throw at that glass house.
I mean, going back to like our review of 13th Age, the one unique thing about adventurers. I mean, that's like a dead chew-in for like, I have the dreams of a dead Titan, as your one unique thing. I agree. I love legendary and unique magical items. If this been the prelude to a campaign or first adventure, I obviously would have given everybody a chance to find it. Yeah.
Wasn't it Earth Dawn where the more research you do on your magic items, the more you unlock their powers?
I believe so. That's what I've read.
Cool.
That's what I've heard. I've not actually played or like read Earth Dawn fully, but like we'll put that up in the list. One of the games we could cover. You could vote on Earth Dawn. Yeah.
If I can pry it out of my kids' hands.
Games that have interesting treatment of magic items, like one of my things I love doing in D&D one-shots or even campaigns is to give the players a deck of many things, because at least it'll generate interesting things. Or make a modified version of the deck of many things, so it doesn't like end your character, but may put a curse on them or something interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Is you want something that generates story. You want something that generates something to happen. If it's just +1 against demon, okay, cool. That's it. That's the end. But if it has dead dreams of a dead Titan, that generates like for something to happen next. And that's what role playing is about. What's going to happen next?
And wildness. This is what, for all my carping about this, it does recognize in some ways. I mean, it's got the constraint. It is the railroad, but it is the railroad to Awesome Town. And it does recognize and leave space for the wildness of the players. This is something I felt when we were playing it, where because it was such a simple, straightforward, direct, uncomplicated narrative, it left space for all the characterization we wanted to do. With, James's character who's like, because I have a sword, I am your leader. And my stuffy chaos usher. And
he was great.
And his wheezy, pathetic wife, and and Gareth's bickering dwarves.
Oh, they were my bickering dwarves, I'll have you know. But
were they your bickering?
They were my bickering dwarves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, man.
No. It's. I'm not possessive. It's just credit where credit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. It does leave space to breathe. If you want that space to characterize, to improvise, to do the inter-character dialogues, you can talk to the survivors, the surviving humans, and have some interesting dialogues with them. if that's what you want. There are people
Let me do a funny voice. That's all I want.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is for what is, it's really tight. The book is only 20 pages, and that's including the covers. I mean, it did remind me in many ways of the original adventures that that TSR was putting out in the early 80s, where you get a 16-page booklet inside a card cover, which had the maps on it. And retailed for, I mean, back in the day, it was anywhere from £3 to £6 or £7. And, you know, some of them were thicker, but some of the good ones, some of the little ones were surprisingly good. S2, I want to say White Plume Mountain.
I have White Plume Mountain somewhere.
I've not read that in 40 years, but I have fond memories of the little bits of it I remember. And that
I remember Black Razor and like, man, I'm just going to keep this thing for myself.
Yeah, no, these in print, these are like staple bound, like just short little things that are like, looking at their web store right now, I think it's like $10 on average for a module, which is
$10 for the PDF or $10 for the tangible object?
Print and PDF if you get it directly from Goodman Games.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cheap.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, it has a lot of art for a short module. Like
Shout
very
out to Bradley K. McDevitt for page 8. I'm like, he's read the whole thing. Look at the crappy equipment those poor bastards are using.
Yeah. And a lot of it's very self-consciously art in the style of original D&D, original fantasy games of the late 70s and early 80s. There's some stuff
Bradley
that's almost...
K. McDevitt, how long has he been doing the work?
Yeah.
I know I've seen his stuff for decades.
Goodman does like to hire the older...
the veterans.
The veterans.
If what you want from an OSR game is that sense of being back when you discovered TSR or Dungeons and Dragons or whatever it is, then this is very much an adventure that will do that for you. It's almost a time machine. It's not completely, because as we've said, it's not the same old cliches. It is a linear adventure. It does have a couple of the tropes, but the monsters are pretty much all new. The sense of being somewhere, it's bigger. It's a bigger scale than TSR's Dungeons and Dragons was in the 80s. And you're level 0. This is your first encounter possibly with this games world. And the invisible bridges and chaos lords and stuff. It's what you want from fantasy, because it's what you've got from the fantasy novels that you've been reading. It's what you've got from Michael Moorcock or all the rest of it. And you don't want to be down in the inn cellar killing some giant rats for a few copper pieces. You want to be out there dealing with the big stuff, even though you have 3 hit points and a rolling pin. On that level, it works really well. On another, it does rather throw up why I am not a fan of OSR games.
Yes.
Because it does feel to an extent like they are trying to create the best possible version of a 1980s Chevrolet Impala that they possibly can, or in UK terms, a Ford Granada. The car of the time. How can we make the best Ford Granada there's ever been? Just move with the times. The whole structure of role-playing has changed 2 or 3 times since then. We have skill systems now. You might have heard of them. We have player-centered narrative, the whole Powered by the Apocalypse stuff, GM-less games, solo games, they're all out there. You don't just have to be trying to recreate the thrill that you had the first time you played D&D. You move on. There are new thrills. There are bigger thrills. You don't have to keep trying to reinvent and recapture that magic. And for me, a lot of the SR, DCC is one of the good ones, because it goes beyond. But the people who are slavishly essentially trying to recreate or optimize a very early version of role-playing, I don't see the point. I mean, I'm not going to yuck on anyone's yum. If you're enjoying it, if that is the style of game you like, good for you. Would I ever develop anything like that? I was bored of that stuff in the 80s. Move on, find new barriers, find things that haven't been done yet.
I'm trying to remember what I was working on, where I'm working on character generation, and I was talking to Jonathan Tweet about it, and I'm like, I just want character generation with this to be fun and interesting the way D&D character generation was when I was like 10, and you would just sit down and roll up 4 or 5 characters just to see what happened. And he's like, that may be more of a function of you being 10 than it was of D&D having any kind of special sauce. And I still have tried to make character generation that's cool and fun. And I think the rain stuff, where you just get wild results off of many, many charts, which is how OSR would do it. But yeah, trying to make something that is the same kind of fun that you had when you were 14 is great. Trying to make something that is the exact same fun you had when you were 14 is maybe less great, and maybe kind of tilting your lance at a windmill. It's like, you're not 14, probably.
Yeah.
So if you were, you'd be doing TikTok dances.
God. Yeah, and nostalgia is a big driver for games, and games playing. We do try and, it's why people keep playing Monopoly. It's because, or one of the reasons, because they enjoyed it when they were kids and they want to pass that pleasure on to other members of the family or whatever it is, or they want to try and recapture that magic. And sometimes you can succeed.
I just want to feel like I did before the backaches.
Exactly, yeah. And the magic circle, the space we enter when we play games, is really powerful. You can do a huge amount in that. I was talking to someone before Christmas. Westminster Libraries, actually the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea in London, which incorporates Westminster or chunks of Westminster or overlaps with Westminster. Their libraries now have a lending collection of board games and role-playing games, which you can take out for a month at a time, and then you can extend that. You can extend it for 2 or 3 months if you want. And the primary driver for this is that during lockdown, a lot of kids lost their social skills pretty much because they were stuck at home. This stuff hadn't really become embedded, particularly if you were a kid who wasn't terribly social to start with. And there are kids who are having behavioral problems because they lack that level of socialization within teens. And one of the ways to get that back is to sit around a table and play games in a safe space. And that's enormously powerful and it's enormously vivid. I suspect those kids probably haven't played a lot of board games beforehand. I teach game design to young people on behalf of the Prince's Trust. I'm not sure if it is still the Prince's Trust. It was set up by King Charles when he was still Prince Charles. I don't know if he's passed it on to his... Anyway, I digress. But I teach...
This is hilarious to Americans, man. This is just...
The royals don't just sit there and wave. They do set up charities and institutions and stuff that do good works, quite often for underprivileged people. And the Prince's Trust is one of those. So I teach game design skills as part of a course to teach, basically to encourage kids, to show them that designing video games is something that they could possibly do as a career. But step one is this is how games work, and this is how you design one. This is a board game. This is how you make one. Go away and make a game. And we do that. And a lot of kids have almost zero experience of board games because, fair enough. It's 2024. Even watching them play video games or talk about video games, this is something they're passionate about, and they feel it's their safe space. And like I say, that's a very, very powerful driver and incentive for getting people to do stuff and getting them to do it over and over again, which is the core, particularly of traditional role play, the weekly group that meets up and plays the ongoing campaign. So I think it can be a driver. The games can drive the desire, and the desire can drive the games as well.
But it has to start somewhere. And, and this is like a good onboarding way for people to
the patient zero problem.
Yeah. I mean, that's always been role playing as a hobby. Problems getting more people into the hobby. How do you do that? Oh yeah, just read these 3 200-page books. Yeah, no, it's easy.
Which cost what, $40 each?
Yeah. something like that. But this is a smoother process. And, despite the OSR sort of trappings, like DCC is kind of an odd duck in that it's not, there is now not just the OSR, there's the NSR, the New School Renaissance, which I've mentioned before, but it's kind of, there's not just the peasant funnel, which is entirely original to DCC. There's also the luck attribute as a meta currency, and, player characters, even though they have 1 hit point or 1d4 hit points, they can be rolled over if you can recover the body, and there's a chance they live, which happened in our adventure, our run of this module. So it's OSR, it's OSR, but without the problems of OSR in a sense. It smooths out a lot of the sticking points that prevent a lot of people from playing it. Like, I made my character and now he's dead in the first encounter. Well, you've got backup characters. Oh, well, maybe he's not dead. Maybe we can check his body and see that he's all right.
Blackleaf can't be dead.
Blackleaf made her luck check. She's fine. Don't worry about it. And also it kind of gives that interesting, like, which we saw in this scenario, which is like you're burning points of luck to survive. And so, one of your characters is like, okay, I got to make this check. Okay. Oh shit. Now they've gotten hit by the enemy and now they're really dead because I don't have any luck to make my roll, check the body roll. So it gives this sort of interesting dramatic timing so that all the deaths kind of happen closer towards the end when people don't have as much luck to burn. Which is what I like. I don't mind killing player characters in adventure. I just don't like killing them in the first act because, I don't want a player to sit out for 2/3 of the adventure. This is the product of a mature company with a lot of institutional experience and like, in terms of like, they know what they want to do and they know what kind of experience they want to deliver and they've polished it to a fine point. You may not like that experience, but this is what DCC is about. Now, there are better scenarios in terms of like providing choice, actual, non-linearity. But like, you get a feel of like what a DC game should be like after playing this adventure. You should get the weirdness and the memorable moments, like fighting a giant pumpkin with flaming, that eats the player characters and waking up and rescuing a demon lord and like all of these very memorable things that you can tell your friends over lunch at the convention. Oh man, this morning, that scenario was great. It was crazy,
A jack-o'-lantern basically owned us.
Yeah. He was very polite about it though.
Oh, he was lovely.
Yeah. He was lovely. Yeah. So like, I think it's, by no means this is a perfect scenario, but I think it does what it set out to do. And it's just, you have to understand what it's trying to set out to do, which is to provide more of the feeling of it, the polished, the nostalgia as you want to remember it, not as you actually remember it.
It's like I don't like nostalgia, and I suspect I experience the memories of the past differently than a lot of people do, because I talk to my peers and they're nostalgic for the 80s and they're like, oh, the music was so good. And remember with Madonna and the leg warmers and the giant hair. And I'm like, what I remember is the terrible fashions of the 70s still being around and Ronald Reagan and worrying every day that I was going to perish in a nuclear holocaust because I didn't do the duck and cover drill. That's my 80s. And so that just seems different. And, my nostalgia for D&D, I'm like, yeah, I remember having fun playing D&D, but I also remember D&D being a colossal drag back in the late 70s and early 80s. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I'm okay with moving on from that.
Well, yeah, it's like 1980s in Hollywood is like neon colors, Miami Vice pastels, like rock and synthesizer music from John Carpenter. And but the 80s that were there, everything was brown and ugly. Like all the furniture was brown. The walls were just, that fake wood paneling.
The golden age of leaded gas fumes and untreated childhood concussions.
You can't even watch a lot of comedies from the 80s now because you just watch it like, oh God, that's horrible. Don't say that. Don't do that. Like, what are you doing?
You can't call
lady?
Black people that.
Well, I'm just thinking like Revenge of the Nerds. It's just like, oh god, they should be me too. This is gross.
There's a name for that, and the name is Rape by Deception.
Yeah.
No,
it's not good.
It's a terrible movie. It's bad.
I think the people who enjoy this scenario, people who like fantasy, role played it with sort of like high fantasy, like just
you are for sure onto something with the van art.
Yeah. Like
idea,
more fantasy that is fantastic, like that is exaggerated, where the colors are brighter, the magic is weird, and the stakes are high. It is
interestingly okay. Yeah, this may be late in the game to bring this up, but it's not the huge empowerment fantasy that historical 80s D&D is remembered as and often was. This is categorically not a Monty Hall game. This is the game where the guy who started out owning a sword is the optimized example of character. We had people waving around butcher knives, and it's like, what do you bring to the party? Oh, I've got 100 feet of rope. Wow. I want to stay on her good side. We might need that rope.
And you did need the rope.
And we did. Yeah. And,
needed the rope.
If you played 80s D&D long enough, you were 10th level and you were waving around, Black Razor from White Plume Mountain that you'd stolen. And you have these, you're orbited by a small constellation of Ioun stones, and you're this, it's like, oh, well, these goblins aren't worth a cloud kill. I'm just going to punch them to death. And this Hole in the Sky is not that. Hole in the Sky is desperate. Oh, if I get a rat bite, it's going to be infected. And if my character catches cold on the infinite bridge, that is definitely life threatening. So it is.
There's no rats. It's chaos pigs at a minimum, or woven women, or stranded madmen, or arachnid
underground chaos pigs.
Yeah,
a cold.
Oh yeah, that's right. They're burrowing. Yeah,
yeah.
They pop up and they're semi-intelligent. Yeah, I didn't use. I actually specifically chose the random encounter. By the way, I chose supply cache because I was again like. This
we don't have chaos pig time in this.
We don't have chaos pig time, and we did not. I was trying to get it done in faster than 4 hours, so and I figured Cur Maxima was going to be deadly enough.
Yeah. Well figured. But yes, this is not the power fantasy. In some ways, it reminded me of Delta Green and other horror games where it's like, this is a disempowerment fantasy. It's just like, let's see if I get through this. And that's what makes it, what drove me anyway towards characterization. I'm like, this character has 2 hit points. I am going to milk every amount of pathos out of them before they get bitten by a house cat and perish.
Yeah. James, any final thoughts?
Yeah. Everdawn is, Earthdawn is $10 on drive-through right now. It's in the sale. And it has sold, it is a silver level seller, which is somewhere between 100 and 200 copies. That is pitiful for a game that was really undervalued when it came out, I think. So have a quick look at drive-through and see if Earthdawn is still at $10, even if it's at full price, which is not that much.
Well, the newest worth a look. The newest edition of Earthdawn is from 2016, so that may have something to do with it. I don't think it's.
Yeah, no, this was second edition, which I think, I don't know if that's the one. Anyway,
no.
But no, it's weird because I really enjoyed playing through this, and then reading it was actually a very different experience, which has no. I'm not saying anything about your GMing, Ross. It's just there's a lot of background, there's a lot of material within the text of the adventure that the players do not get to see. And on one level, that's great. I think the GM should know more than the players and shouldn't just have to, as we were talking about, freeform invent stuff, because then you do run into the goblin in a tutu problem where the players just go off.
I've not heard this problem formulated in exactly this way, perhaps.
It's somebody's anecdote, or it could well have been something on the social network we don't talk about, But somebody referred to it at some point as the goblin in the tutu, and I just like, I know exactly what you mean, and I've run into that problem, though not with goblins and tutus, several times before. You throw out a little detail in color text, and the players just lock onto it and will not lock off.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's not a problem you're going to have here. I love it for its scope. I love it for its imagination. It's reinvention. It's not just reinventing D&D. It is putting a new spin on it background-wise. Mechanically, it's basically D&D. So it's got some of the thrill of the old stuff, but at the same time, it is not just retreading the greatest hits. If I had played this as my first adventure, like I say, I think my mind would have been blown even more than D&D did the first time I played it. I think as an introduction to what role-playing is and how whacked out and crazy and fun it can be, this is a pretty good example.
I actually looked online. I did a search through like subreddits and review sites of like, what is a good DCC peasant funnel to run to introduce players to? And a lot of people came up with this one as one of the best ones. Okay. So yeah. And I'd already run They Serve Brandel and Red, so I didn't want to run that again. So I wanted something new for myself as well.
She's so jaded.
I'm so jaded. I get to have fun too, Greg.
And you call yourself a game moderator.
So thank you all for listening. So if you're listening to this, our Kickstarter should be live, but we'll have more adventures for backers to vote on of what we should review next. I do know that we'll be looking at things like Jailbreak from Unknown Armies. I think we can get a hold of the author for that. I'm not sure though. But we'll put some other DCC modules, some other fantasy RPG adventures on the list and see what you all want to hear us go through. We're not going to be playing through all of them, obviously. That would take forever, but certainly reading good modules can be very informative. And there's a lot of different types of modules out there. But we'll also be reviewing systems. We'll definitely put Earthdawn in the list of candidates.
Up, doesn't it?
It is a game I've heard nothing but good things about. But yeah, the first edition was the second edition was 2001. So and the most recent edition is 2016. So it has been neglected for a while. Yeah, we're excited to be, and we'll also be doing supplements. And we'll have a list of those, and we'll have some other rewards for backers as well. We're still, and stretch goals will be, we're fine tuning that as we're recording this. But check out our Kickstarter page, and thank you so much for your support. And we'll have a link to our Ludonarrative Discord, a community Discord, where there's a lot of really interesting discussions about RPGs and other game design topics. And, yeah. Electronic cars for some reason recently. But, no, it's a great community, and we'll be happy to talk to you there. But anyways, that's, I think, everything for this episode. So
all right.
We'll talk to you all later.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.